All right, welcome back to Bolus Maximus. We're here in the studio today. My name is Matt Taro. I'm with my co-founder and co-host, Mr. Denson.
Hey, how's it going?
What's your first name?
Brandon.
Middle initial?
Anthony.
Put them all together?
Anthony Apples, awesome, amazing.
All right. And we're here with a local Bolus Maximus contributor, somebody who we've spent some time with here in San Diego and a good friend of the program, Steve Freeman. Steve?
It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Really looking forward to having a conversation today about putting you in things about San Diego, things about diabetes, LADA, type 1 diagnosis. So how long you been in Southern California?
All my life. Lived in Southern California, went to school in San Diego, went to college, so love the area.
Apparently. And you love the doctors down here.
I do. I've been coming down to endocrinology at UCSD for the last 3 years, I believe.
And so we won't talk about what you're currently doing, but we will talk about is how you became a diabetic. I think it's really important. You know, we can talk a little bit about technology, but you were diagnosed late.
Yeah, I was 40 when I was diagnosed. Misdiagnosed, which is typical at the time. You were over college age, so you must have been a type 2.
Yeah.
It's very traditional definition, juvenile diabetes or adult onset diabetes. And that's what, and I was even seeing an endocrinologist, and they just started treating me as a type 2. Went on oral drugs, metformin, then Evania, one of the other ones, and didn't seem to be working. So then went on Lantus, that wasn't doing it. So then we went on Novolog Mix and just kept treating it that way, called it a type 2, and that was the end of the day, and we just moved on. And did that for about almost just over 5 years.
Wow.
Whoa. So out the gate, you're diagnosed as type 2, and then you were treated as a type 2 patient for 5 years?
Yes. And so
Wow.
I still wasn't getting the control, still wasn't getting, and when I look back on it now, I say, this is ridiculous. I had all the signs of what I found out later was LADA, because I'd lost a lot of weight. I was down to 125 pounds. I was doing the typical, what you would expect of any person who gets onset of type 1. I was up all night all the time, drinking everything I could get my hands on, passing it right through. I mean, I remember going on flights to my sister's in Atlanta, and that was, if we got delayed on the ground, it was really painful or stuff like that, because I need to get up to go to the lavatory, and it's like, no, you can't get up. You have to have your seatbelt on. Can't be in a car more than 15 minutes. I mean, it's stuff that we've all experienced now.
Yeah.
And I still wasn't even getting control on the medications. So then I started looking at diet changes. I even went to I was still working out with a personal trainer and talked to her about it, and was doing a lot of reading. So I went down a vegan diet because it said type 2 is not supposed to really help you. Diet's a very big factor in all diabetes, but especially in type 2. So, you get much better, you get a better bang for your buck with diet and exercise. So I was really trying to do that. It just wasn't working. And then January of 2010, I remember picking them up at the airport, taking them back home, and then just staying at their house that night because I just didn't feel well. But I was up all night sick. By the morning, I said, we need to go to the hospital. And she said, you want me to take you? And I said, no, call the paramedics.
Yeah.
So that was the first time I went into the ICU with DKA. I was in 2 days ICU and then 2 days in room, and then repeated the same thing the next month.
I can't imagine how many people have had a similar experience where their understanding of their own body has been telling them that what their doctor is telling them is wrong.
Yeah. Well, and the second time, I remember it was Super Bowl weekend, and I was feeling bad the whole weekend. I remember Monday morning I was supposed to get up to go meet with the trainer and stuff like that. Remember waking up at 6 a.m. saying, I don't think I'm going to make it. Still to this day, I thought I called her, but she said I never called, and nobody heard from me since. From that time in the morning I can remember until I woke up in ICU later, and they said somebody had to come break in and take me by paramedics back to the hospital.
Jesus.
And that time they said I was within about a couple hours of being too acidic to reverse it.
Wow. That's crazy.
But then, started seeing a new endocrinologist and said, you know, we need to rethink this thing. You're really not a type 2. We need to start treating you as a type 1 because you are a type 1, and you need to start understanding what that does to your body and how you need to be aware of things. And never knew what DKA was. Never had an idea. I mean, and I think I told you in the past, my whole view of diabetes was either that was a real old person's disease. I had a great grandmother. Oh yeah, she's got diabetes. She can't really eat that big of a dessert at the end of the day. Or with stuff like the movie years ago with Julia Roberts, Steel Magnolias, where she just goes, it had a very negative view, and so it's like, well, that's not me, stuff like that. But
yeah,
so it's been a learning experience.
I still never seen that. So when people reference it, I don't know. But
we gotta watch it.
But your learning experience was like it was you doing a lot of the research, and it didn't feel like the doctors were really understanding.
Oh no, and even when I was still being treated as type 2, I had a whole library of books that I got from Amazon. I was studying everything, trying to understand it all. And of course, the response I get back from family members is, "Well, how'd this happen? We don't have any diabetics in our family. How did that happen?" So
yeah.
And part of that was like, what did you do wrong was sort of the underlying question.
Yeah.
So which is still there today,
So how did that, I guess, how did you feel after like being treated for 5 years as a type 2 and then all of a sudden finding out that you actually weren't a type 2, you were a type 1? Like, how did you make that transition? How did it feel? First and foremost, because you're getting information from a doctor that's telling you one thing and you're telling them how you feel, and it's like they almost maybe not acknowledging it.
Well, one thing is I got all new doctors.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did that.
But even when I was diagnosed originally, and this is the strange thing about it, I was not feeling well. Like I said, I was drinking all the time, urinating all the time, just not sleeping, all this sort of stuff. Go to the doctor and he says, you don't fit the standard profile of a type 1 or of a diabetic. I want you to, you're losing too much weight. I want you to put on weight. I want you to eat everything you get your hands on, and I'll order some blood tests. So, okay, we do that. I go get, and I'll see you in 3 weeks. So I go get the blood test before I'm going to see him again on a Friday. I think that Monday morning I got home from working out with the trainer. I get a call from the doctor's office. Said, "Can you come in? The doctor would like to see you." I said, "Oh, you got the blood work back?" "Yeah, we did." "What time did you want me to come in?" They said, "Well, how soon can you get here?" "Okay, I guess I'll get dressed, go over there." Walk in. I said, "It's not what you expected, is it?" He says, "Nope." He said, so they took a glucose meter and tested me, glucose meter, and the meter just said high. So, it was over 400.
Definitely.
And so they said, "Oh, well," and I said, he said, "Well, we got to deal with this." And I said, "That's fine, but I'm supposed to be leaving for San Diego tonight. I'm supposed to be down in San Diego tonight for business, and I'm going to be there for a couple of days." He says, "No problem." He says, "We just don't know where your blood sugars are right now. So here, let me give you a copy of your chart. We're going to send you to the emergency room, and they have the ability to test you right away. They can give you the insulin, bring you back down." He said, "By tonight, you'll be heading back down to San Diego. No problems." So they drew some blood, and then they gave me a shot of insulin. And they drew some blood first to send to the lab, and they gave me a shot. They didn't know how much to give, but they just gave me some.
Just to take it down.
Start bringing it down.
Just give them a little insulin.
Then they give me my chart. Said, "Take this with you. We'll call ahead. They know you're coming." And then I had to drive down the freeway. It was several miles away, driving down there, get to the hospital, go in the emergency room, talk to the intake person, explain the whole thing to them. Then the nurse comes in, explain the whole thing to them. Doctor comes in, and finally, I'm not in a good mood at this point because I'm not feeling well and all this. I said, "Do any of you communicate?" My doctor's called. I brought my chart. I've told you 3 times.
Well,
get your act together.
What else do you want from me? Like,
so they put me on an IV, sit me in a room for several hours, and numbers finally come back. I think I saw the doctor twice the whole time. He popped in twice. Second time he pops in, he says, "Okay, we're sending you upstairs." I said, "What do you mean going upstairs?" He said, "We're admitting you." I said, "Well, why?" "Well, because we need to admit you." And I said, "No, I'm going home. I got to go to San Diego tonight." And thinking about it now, and we've talked about this before, but thinking about it, had he had better bedside manners and stuff like that, it probably would have changed the scope of what would have gone on for the next several years for me. But I said, "No, my doctor said, you've taken care of me. I can go home." He goes, And this is what clinched it. He says, you could die. And I said, wait a minute. I'm not going to die tonight. You've already dropped my blood sugars down to normal. So, so I had to sign all these papers to leave. And I think about it now and say, had that doctor had I been a juvenile and the doctor had come to me a different way and say, hey, we got a real problem here. I mean, there would have been a different way of approaching it. I would have been in a hospital. They would have been monitoring me. It probably would have picked up maybe a type 1 sooner instead of this whole thing. Because once I left the emergency room, I went back that Friday to see my GP, who's the one that sent me there. They got the lab work back from the blood that they'd drawn that morning before they sent me to the hospital. And you could tell when they looked at the chart from the blood work, they were visibly concerned about what had happened that Monday. When they'd drawn that blood, my blood glucose was 850. My A1C was 14.5. And they handed me a chart and told me to drive down the freeway to go to the emergency room.
Wow.
And, you know, I know most places, if you had a number like that, they wouldn't let you out of their sight.
No, and they shouldn't.
No.
They shouldn't, you know.
But then even after that, okay, so down to 125 pounds, all these other symptoms and stuff. And he said, oh, there's an endocrinologist next door. Why don't you go see if he's on your plan? Go see them. And between the two doctors, they're just treating me as a type 2. Well, you're 40. Okay. So let's start on metformin. Metformin, maybe we did okay. Then we started Vania. Then we started another drug, and then it wasn't working. So then, okay, we're going to do Lantus. And, you know, growing up, I had a significant needle phobia. Yeah. I mean, like a lot of us do, but I mean, it was to the point where don't even try and give me a shot.
Would you pass out?
I would fight. I mean, all these different things, you know, run out of the room, all these different things. And now they're saying you're going to give yourself a shot every night. And those first 3 or 4 weeks, the first they were going to have me use syringes. And they finally said, no, we're going to do that. We'll give you pins. So I sit there and I'd load up the pin. I'd sit there, an hour would go by, 2 hours go by, before I could finally get up the courage to do it, to use to give myself the dose. Then Lantus still wasn't fixing the problem. Then we went to Novolog Mix. And then even then finding a good doctor is really important, because I kept saying, well, how much insulin should I be taking? Because they were having me take it twice a day, morning and before dinner, before breakfast, before dinner on the mix. And it's like, well, we don't have an exact number, so you just have to see how it works. It's like,
that doesn't feel
what's a sliding scale? Yeah. You know, why can't you tell me anything? And so part of that frustration was I just had to go out and start to learn as much as I could. Now, again, type 1 was not on my radar, because I'd been told type 2, I'm going to learn that. And so I'm just going along. And I had my glucose meter, but I checked maybe before, I checked before I did my shots, just so I sort of knew where I was, but I wasn't checking all the time and stuff like that. After I ended up twice within a 1 month period, DKA, got a new endocrinologist from the hospital that got assigned to me. So I stayed with her. She's the one that, said, okay, this is the new reality. You are, type 1. We need to start looking at this. Second time I was DKA was February. By April, they had me on a pump.
Yeah.
And that changed a lot. And then still wasn't getting a lot of good control. So I said, it's still not working. So I talked to the doctor. He says, okay, here's this company called Dexcom. Why don't you call them and see? So I went through all the hoops to get my Dexcom. And so I've been on Dexcom since 2010. And,
wow.
So it sounds like when you switch, when you find out that you were actually a type 1, that changed things a lot for you, as far as just you educating yourself on it. But then obviously getting on the technology, that kind of was a huge game changer for you too, as far as managing it.
That was, and through learning that through the rep at Dexcom, I found out I remember seeing a flyer in a doctor's office once, but didn't really pay attention to it. But talking to him, he said, well, have you ever heard of this group called TCOID, taking control of your diabetes? And so, no, well, they're having a conference. Why don't you go down to San Diego and go to the conference? So that was then the next step, where that's the first time I went someplace where they actually said, there's such a thing as a LADA, that we can't use juvenile diabetes, adult onset diabetes as terms anymore, because they're not true. And so that was the first part where I started to understand, one, that understand what's happening, that I wasn't alone, that this wasn't some weird thing. And the only comfort was that I'm not the only one going through this, but that's of little comfort. I mean, it's hard to go through. And I think that's some of the stuff we talked about, where we want to really use Bolus Maximus as an outreach to others so they don't feel isolated, don't get stuck by people look at you and say, how can you be a type 1? I still get that today. You've only been a type 1 how long? How could you be a type 1? No.
Yeah. Well, I think that support system is imperative. It feels imperative for newly diagnosed patients, so that they understand that they're not alone, so that they understand that the only reason that they shouldn't feel scared is A, because they can do it, and B, because there are people around them that are doing the same thing, who are living their life. And that's probably harder for the type 1 diagnosed patients after a certain age, because you are so much more independent. Even within your own age group, sex, race, you're still a very independent person, you know? And I think that, right, you were, 40 years old, like you're well amongst, you're your own man at that point, doing all your own things, and no one really is going to tell you what to do.
Well, and I was trying to get a master's degree. I was trying to, this was 2 weeks before I was graduating with a master's degree, and I'm trying to get my projects finished, and I had to do a capstone project, and you're working all night and stuff like that. And then you look at it and say, I don't know. I look at people like you, the two of you, and say, I don't know how you did it as, late high school, college, because I would think that'd be just as hard. I mean, each life phase brings its own uniqueness to it. I think the difference with the LADAs right now is there's a support system built into the traditional juvenile diabetes. I mean, JDRF. I mean, even talking to, getting involved with JDRF in Orange County, their goal, I mean, they're focused more on Padre. They're focused more on kids. They're really, and if you're an adult, you've probably come up through the system, so they're not focused on you as much. And that was probably the little bit more of the isolating thing, was there weren't groups like Bolus Maximus at the time. There wasn't that type of support. TCID had been around for a few years, but it wasn't that well known, and it wasn't that big. But it's probably the first thing that really got me on the right track, and then starting to learn more, and then running into other people that ran into the same problem, and sort of in the back door becoming what we're trying to do with Bolus Maximus now, being that advocate, being that resource, being that non-medical professional that can help people understand what's going on in life. And it's more than just a prescription.
And I think you hit on some very important topics in regards to just like when we're diagnosed at a certain age, and this disease has been looked at as a juvenile disease for a long time, we end up missing a lot of different pockets, teenagers, middle age, and even older seniors in this with the LADA. And, I think with me and Matt, what we realized at the age we were diagnosed, 16, 17 years old, we realized there wasn't an outlet. There wasn't an outlet for us directly to go speak with individuals that had it, maybe people that had grew up with it. And, now they were kind of seeking something, so they weren't isolated as well. But, I think even going through like JDRF and possibly even Beyond Type 1 and some of these other organizations, their focus are specifically on kids, which is fine. But these kids grow up, so they have to have an outlet. They have to have somewhere to go. They have to be able to connect with other individuals, and not only connect with other individuals, but help other individuals that may be where they can meet where currently where they're at, you know what I mean? So, yeah, no, I mean, this is, it's just interesting, very interesting.
I'm going to say something. It's something that I often forget, not because it wasn't a big part of my life, but because it's been so long since then. First of all, you made mention of when we were diagnosed going into college. I have absolutely no idea how I lived through college, not having a continuous glucose monitoring system and taking shots and testing my blood sugar. The fact that I'm still alive is, if you're listening to this and you don't think you can do it, if I could do it in college, you can do it. But it's not something, we talk a lot about not having, when we were diagnosed, the support system that we were really looking for or could have used. I did have a support system. I went to a university based on the fact that the guy I went to visit was a type 1 diabetic. And then I joined the fraternity that he was in, where there were 2 other type 1 diabetics. So when I'm pledging and I'm out doing an activity, because that's what you do when you pledge, you do stupid stuff in the middle of the night. We would do stuff. And then I had people with like Pop-Tarts in their pocket, and they were like, Taro, you okay? Or they like pull me out of line, you know, and it wasn't, it was nothing like disrespectful. I didn't drink during my process. Thankfully it was all about respect. But I did, you know, find myself in a position where I was like, yeah, I need that Pop-Tart. So I did kind of have people that were looking after me, but if you're diagnosed at 30, 40, 50 years old, you don't have a group that's just designed for you to walk into.
Well, and I knew maybe 1 or 2 people tangentially that were diabetics. So there was, who would I even call to ask questions and stuff? One of the things that really was great for me, it's been about 4 years ago now, was going to a Connected in Motion camp and going to a diabetes adult camp. And that was probably the first time since started down this whole road that it was just, it felt great to be normal.
Yeah.
To go away. We went away to Catalina Island. Only people there except for the camp staff, which was a Boy Scout camp that they had rented out. Everybody there had type 1. So it wasn't even when you were having, you know, family or stuff like that. Everybody was the same. Dexcom went off. Oh, that's a Dexcom. You know, it wasn't like, oh, I got to hurry up and cover this up.
Who is it?
You know, well, it was more of that than anything else. It's not like I'm trying to hide it. It's like years ago when we used to go to meetings and stuff like that in a big conference room. My dad would leave his cell phone on and go, you know, and everybody's looking around. Who's that person with the cell phone? You know, you have your Dexcom, it'd go off like that. You didn't feel like that. It's just everybody, you knew what it was, and everybody just wanted. I remember after breakfast on Sunday morning, I went back to my cabin, got a new infusion set, got a new cartridge and stuff like that. Went to the next session, to our next learning session, and not feeling like I have to go hide in the corner or hide in the bathroom to change out my infusion set. I just do it right there because it was just a normal part of life, and everybody understood. And that was a great opportunity. If anybody hasn't had that opportunity, seems like some people say they had it as kids because they had kids camps, but if you haven't had a chance to get away, and it's a great opportunity just to give you that whole new mental, you know, understanding.
We're going to have to pull up at this Connected in Motion.
We're going to have to definitely go to Connected in Motion. I've heard a lot about it. I'm really bummed that I missed out on an opportunity. I had been traveling. I wasn't around. But they do them all over the country. It started in Canada. Mm-hmm. Shout out to the Connected in Motion team.
Jen's great.
Yep.
Jen Hansen.
Yep. And they're good friends of some of the organizations that we work with and have mm-hmm. worked with. So I definitely love to do that.
And I connected to, I'm a Tandem pump user, and Tandem is a supporter of theirs. Yep. And they even sent out the notice, said, hey, we're offering a $50 discount. You want to go this? So I remember I called my Tandem rep and said, what do you know about this? She said, well, it must be good. Tandem supporting it. She says, I don't know directly, but she says, I know people at Tandem that go to it and they think it's the greatest thing. So I said, okay, I went.
That's awesome.
And you like finding yourself outdoors, spending time with other people. If you've never been to camp and you're a diabetic type 1 and you want to go to Connected in Motion, look it up. It's definitely something that I would recommend based on what my knowledge is of who's been and what they do and the programs that they do. So, mm-hmm. And you mentioned before taking control of your diabetes. That's another type of an event, less camp-like, more conference-like, and that really supports type 1 and type 2 diabetics. It's usually down here in San Diego.
They're all over the country, though.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, they do conferences all over the country.
Here?
Originated out of UCSD.
Okay.
What I do like about that, though, is they do open that conference to anybody. If your caregiver, you come. But they do a couple things. One, they have medical professionals come get their continuing ed courses, and they'll sit there and talk to the medical professionals while they're in the same room with us and say, when you ask a patient this way, you're going to get this type of response because the way you ask is accusatory. So like you want their blood sugar logs. Don't say, well, why were you here? And I ran into that several years ago. I was in an emergency room for another something else. Doctor's sitting at the desk. I'm over in a room over here. He's yelling at me, why weren't you taking your insulin? Well, why is he yelling that across the room? 2, he assumed I hadn't taken my insulin. I had, but because of what was going on, the insulin wasn't effective.
Right.
So that's, again, where people don't understand. But what I like about, not only have the medical professionals at TCID, but then they have, it's open to type 1s, type 2s, and type 3s.
Yeah. Yeah, it's inclusive.
And who's the type 3? They're all the ones that aren't type 1s or type 2s, but try and tell type 1s and type 2s what they're supposed to be doing.
And I feel like, you know, there's many forms of diabetes, and you had mentioned LADA before. Was that a diagnosis? Did you go from type 2 to a LADA diagnosis to a type 1, or is it right from type 2 to type 1?
The way it was for me is that I was being considered type 2, then the endocrinologist says you're type 1. It's when I finally went to TCOID and understood what was happening.
Oh.
And understood that that was a subset, because I kept getting this back. Well, how could you be type 1? Well, now I can know how I was. It's the same thing that happens to everybody. We still had the same autoimmune problem. It's just mine took longer to actually hit the tipping point.
Yeah.
And so I understand that now. And it was nice to hear that. And, you know, again, well, what did you do wrong? Why, you know, and why do you have this problem now? Well, I didn't do anything wrong. But it took a while to work through that.
Yeah, I think we got a lot of opportunity to speak with people who ultimately have been misdiagnosed. They were diagnosed as a type 2. I think it's probably very common, right? Diabetes is considered an epidemic, and
not a pandemic, an epidemic.
We're currently in a pandemic while experiencing some rather tragic epidemics around the world. Diabetes being one of them. You know, it's 400 plus million people in the world right now, 7 billion people on the planet, and 400 million have diabetes.
And it's growing.
And it's going up. And by 2025, it's supposed to be like 700 million.
Well, there's even a study that just came out that said the pandemic, people that are getting sick with the COVID, some of them are actually turning into type 1s because it causes the immune system to attack the pancreas. Well, that's what we know what type 1 is.
Correct.
We don't know exactly. And it's interesting because I think I've been hearing for years now that they're still trying to figure out what causes type 1. Is there a viral component? Well, we don't know, but we know several different things can cause a type 1 damage to your pancreas in different ways. But that's unfortunate that it's happening to some people this way, but maybe it's going to shine some more light. I guess I'm thankful now that there's more resources, more opportunities, just like how we've all got connected and how we want to build and do things together. And we were talking a little bit earlier before we started about technology. And, you know, I talked to some people now that have been diabetics for 50, 60 years. I don't know how I could have dealt with it. You know,
No.
I mean, since being finally getting the type 1 diagnosis and having a Dexcom, I've been on Dexcom for 11 years now almost. And yeah, at first it wasn't that great, but it still gave me that tool to let me know, was I going up? Was I going down? How am I going to start dealing with things? I used to be much more brittle, and now I've gotten to the point now where when I'm using my Control IQ, I'm sitting at 95% time in range. You know, so it's taken a long time, and I guess my biggest goal out there is to be the resource for other people now, because, you know, just like the three of us have talked about, I've experienced a lot of things, tried to find out how to make it work, and maybe if I've gone through this, to be able to help other people. And
yeah, it's important to have an understanding first and foremost, but then also a desire to help others, because you know, if you have 100 people in a room who all live with the same disease, not every person is going to be supportive of helping everyone else in the room. And it ultimately it kind of falls on a certain group of people to be leaders in that space. We routinely will say, we are not trained medical professionals. Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Yes, it's definitely something that we want to reiterate. None of us are. Sorry, Steve.
No, no, we're not, but we've lived a life, and we can share our experience. I can't tell you what to do, but I can say what has happened to me and where I found relief.
So we're subject matter experts. That's it.
Yeah. And so I think providing that space has been something that we've worked really hard to do. And we appreciate somebody like yourself coming in each week and sharing some of that. Tell me, you wore the pods, you've worn Dexcom for 11 years. You've worn pods. Did you ever wear a Medtronic pump?
No, I started out with the Roche pump, and then switched after 3 years. I switched over. I thought I was going to go to a pod, and just my doctor said, the doctor I was seeing at the time said, just go look out and see what you want. So I just went into the internet search and thought Omnipod was going to be it. And this company that was relatively new on the market, Tandem, and I said, I really like their philosophy. I like them. So I called down there. The rep called me, and it was one of my former reps from Roche. And I think it was within about a year after the T-Slim went out on the market originally. And so I was one of the earlier people in the Tandem family. And so I've been on a Tandem pump for 7.5 years now.
So you got on it around like 2013-ish, 2013?
2014.
2014?
2013, somewhere on there. But so I did the T-Slim, and now I'm on the X2 with the Control IQ. Usually I'm on that.
Yeah.
Not actually wearing it today, but I am usually on that pump, and that's my preference.
We won't get into that right now. We won't get into
But that's definitely, it's quite the progression going from not having a diagnosis, figuring out for yourself what was happening, changes in your diet, changes in your lifestyle, being re-diagnosed as a type 1, and then taking control of that, right? Truly, as we. Well,
yeah, like I said, I mean, I didn't know really anybody with diabetes. So they did, it was you aren't exercising enough and you're eating too much sugar type thing. Diabetes, it's old. And then when I started being around the concept of diabetes, when I was still thinking it was type 2, and I think one point somebody said, have you ever considered a pump? I said, no, why would I want to do that? That's such a pain to deal with. Cause I think the old stories I had heard was the old days when you switched over to a pump, it took a couple months of training and this and that, and you had to do all these logs and this and that. And I said, that's not where I want to be. And so when I got out of the hospital in February, but by April, the doctor said, okay, I'm going to have a Roche rep talk to you. I want you to see if you can get on the pump. No, I really don't want to do that because I don't. Just talk to her. And it was like, that was the easiest thing I ever did was switching over to the pump.
Yeah.
It's like, pump's not for everybody. What I liked about it was really simple was I didn't have to carry a bunch of other stuff around. Yeah, I had a pump on I'd carry something, it was tethered to something all the time, but I didn't have to carry all my needles. I didn't have to carry the insulins. I didn't have to carry all that sort of stuff. And I could, when I still wasn't as comfortable with who I was, I didn't have to figure that I'd have to go hide in a corner or go hide in the bathroom when I went to a restaurant to take my insulin or something like that. I could learn to be a little bit more discreet, and I could just sort of push the buttons, put it away. And at first I even learned how to do my quick bolus right through, so I didn't have to pull it out so nobody saw it. But I got more comfortable, and I felt like I had more control. And so it was much easier change than I thought it would be. And pumps aren't for everybody, but I think it's a great tool. And especially with, having been on a pump for 11 years now, just seeing the advancements in technology. I mean, we talked about, I've been on the Roche pump, I went on Tandem. I've also used periodically a Omnipod. I like the Omnipod for times when I wanted to have a little bit more freedom and not have the cord, as they say. But I haven't used one lately just because I've gotten so used to all the new technology built in with like the Control IQ.
Yep. Talking
to my Dexcom, helping me make the right decisions, helping to control my top end, I've gotten so used to that if something else doesn't have that available, I'm just not interested in using it right now.
Yeah, thanks, but no thanks.
It takes the thinking out of it. We already have to think a lot, dealing with the diabetes every day. So on the mental aspect, it definitely, like being able to have the technology that works best for you, it just makes living with the disease a lot easier. I do want to ask you this, though. For anybody that may be listening or watching this, for you, Steve, what would you tell somebody that may be currently experiencing what you experienced from the very beginning, from being diagnosed with type 2, and they still question about all of the things that they've changed that they're doing, and they're still having a lot of issues? Is there any advice you would give, or any any gyms or anything?
You mean somebody who's type 2 may think that they're misdiagnosed or something like that?
Correct.
First thing I learned, which nobody ever checked, was just get the antibody test done right away. Go to your doctor and say, do a blood test, check and see. That'll help alleviate a lot of things right away. I mean, that would have saved a lot of time for me. It would have saved a lot of, questions, a lot of why am I not doing this right? Why can't I get it? Because I was treating the wrong disease.
Right. Yeah, you're not even treating the right thing.
I mean, symptoms are similar.
Yeah, but
the underlying base is totally different.
Correct. Yeah. Correct.
I mean, today, and I think it's much better over the last 11 years, 12 years, the reality of this is a form of diabetes that, it's a subset of type 1, but that it's out there. You still get people today, doctors, just realize a doctor may be a medical professional. They're the ones we need to talk to for prescriptions for that, like that. But just because you're going to a GP or an endocrinologist, they may not be the right person. So I would seek that information out if you could. Ask if you're hearing this and you feel that way, contact bolus maximus, stuff like that. We'd love to just be there to not give you the medical advice, but to give you the real life experience of what we would suggest. Not to make the medical determinations, but to help you find those medical determinations.
You can call Steve, his cell phone number.
Yeah, right. But I mean, some doctors still don't understand about that it's not juvenile and it's not adult onset.
Well, that's where talking to the community really plays a huge factor, because, you didn't have other people at that time to talk to. Had you talked to people who were living with type 1, you would have found yourself in a position where you were comparing what was happening to you with them.
Correct.
And so that's where there's a lot of patience. And what we hope to do is open up these doors. It's like the two conferences that are next door to each other, and there's a big sliding door in the middle. That's type 1 and type 2. They are similar diseases. They're not the same disease, but they affect the endocrine system. And we want to open that door up so that people understand that you may be a type 2 diagnosed, you may be a type 1 diagnosed as a type 2. And if you don't hear or listen or watch what happens with type 1s, you may never know.
Well, in reality is, unfortunately, you can actually be both, because they're two different diseases that affect that have two different genesis within the body, and you can end up having both. So they are totally different diseases. I mean, I remember going to a JDRF meeting a couple of years ago, and they said one of the things they wished had happened years ago was that a different title had been given to one of them versus the other one.
Yeah.
They're both sort of treated about the same. I mean, you treat the symptoms, the high blood sugars, you treat them with insulin, you treat them, ultimately and stuff like that. But they affect your body totally different. And I even remember when I first was diagnosed as a type 1, they kept saying, well, you need to go on, statin drugs. You need to go on this. You need to go on that. And so, well, why do I need to do that? I don't have high cholesterol. I don't have high blood sugar. I mean, cholesterol. I don't have high, what was the other thing?
Blood
pressure and stuff like that. But it's like, and one doctor said, but that's the UCLA protocol for diabetics. I said, okay, so is that a type 1 or a type 2? Well, I don't know, but that's just the UCLA protocol.
Yeah.
Now, ultimately, I've talked to my endocrinologist over the last couple of years about some of those things, and he'd be supporting of certain medications in certain times. But I think my question is always asking, why? Is it just because somebody else said do this, or do we understand why we're doing what we're doing?
Correct.
Yeah, and that's something that we've talked a lot about with the differences in demographics in the United States, especially within the Black community, and how you may not have an opportunity to ask such questions, where you probably feel like what you're being told is the final word. Here's your diagnosis, live with it, deal with it, and go on your way. And I can't speak from experience, but I can speak from what I've heard, stories from some individuals that we've talked to recently. It seems like it's a very off-putting scenario.
It's really, at the end of the day, I say it all the time, you're your own best advocate. Yep. If you're not getting the attention you deserve, from a doctor, endocrinologist, whoever it is, if they're not lining you up for you to be as successful as you can be, you got to remove that individual from you trying to travel down the path that you're trying to travel down.
Got to get them out of the equation. Well, there's times the first endocrinologist I saw after DKA, and I was seeing her, and she's the one who put me on the pump, got me on the Dexcom. We even had at one point where we had a real big argument, and finally it came down to and this is unfortunate everywhere, their medical profession has gotten to the point where they're dealing in high percentages real quick. They're running the 80-20 rule again. 80% of their patients are not going to listen to what they say anyway, so they're not going to go in detail without it. So if you really feel like you want the answers, stop the doctor or stop somebody and ask them and let them know that you are not one of those 80%, because I had this problem with my endocrinologist at first. She became one of my best advocates a couple of years later. I was in the hospital for a totally different reason, and I went to order food from the cafeteria, and I said, well, I want the oatmeal. I'll have the raisins and the brown sugar. You can't have the raisins. You're diabetic. Why not? I've already accounted for that. Well, you're diabetic. It says on your chart, so we can't give that to you. I said,
give it to me.
I said, give it to me. And so I finally hung up and I called the charge nurse. Charger said, okay, we'll call the endocrinologist. Well, it was my endocrinologist. She happened to be on the floor, and she walked by and she stood right there in the room and talked to the charger. And she says, he knows what he's doing. Take all restrictions off his chart and listen to him.
Yeah.
So, if your doctor's not giving you what you need, first, if you can, I mean, it's difficult. I come to San Diego now because I couldn't find the doctors that could do what I wanted in Orange County, but find a doctor you can build a relationship with and can become your advocate too, and let them know that you're wanting to be a partner in this instead of just being somebody who takes a script and goes to the pharmacy.
Yeah, we're not necessarily advocating for you to play speed dating with your endocrinologist, but
I mean, find one that's going to work for you.
Exactly.
You got to do what you got to do at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like,
No, I mean, I'm not saying each month you're going to go to a different one, but if you're not getting what you need, it's just like in any other situation, whether any type of therapy, any medical thing, if you're not getting the answers you need, do what you need elsewhere to do to get the answers.
Yeah, and you know that, right? Like you can feel whether or not you're getting what you need because you feel satisfied, like mentally and physically.
Just don't take the final answer from the doctor or whoever it is that if that's what they're giving you and it's not changing or it's not helping you, don't take that as the final answer. Like you can question them, and then if you still continue to not get what you need, then that's where you have to look elsewhere.
See, I sort of look at it saying, if I'm going to have a partnership with my doctor and stuff like that, if they can tell me and question me, why can't I ask them and question them? If they take offense to that, then I maybe it's not the right doctor for me. It's my personal opinion.
Sure.
But sometimes there's times, like I said, my endocrinologist, we had a big argument for a couple of minutes, but then we respect each other more because she understood where I was coming from. I understood where she was coming from, and we had a much better relationship then. And I think that really works well in anything. You've got to have the common ground and understand what your goal is.
Yep. And I think the end all is they work for you. So at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. They work for you.
Break the ice.
Serious. So
No, and I think there are great people out there, and they're really trying to do the best they can. But sometimes, again, they're caught in this whole medical system right now where they have to see so many patients a day that they're working on numbers and they're running in and out of the room. So sometimes it's just saying, stop, can I just ask a question?
Yeah. And that must feel so weird. I mean, I've had to do it where I'm like, can you, you're not understanding. I'm like, I've gone to see other doctors like you. I've seen people like you before. Like, let's talk about this. Especially with the gastroenterologist, and I had kind of gone back and forth. It got to a point where I couldn't get a hold of the gastroenterologist just recently. And I called their office probably 4 or 5 times. What I was trying to do was get a refill for a prescription. And as somebody who's been diagnosed, undiagnosed, and then kind of basically told on a third time, like, yeah, you probably have it. I spoke to this doctor. He's like, well, realistically, he's like, the only way to tell if you have gastroparesis is to do the gastro emptying study, which I'm going to get set up for myself here. But I talked to this guy after such a frustrating day. I went on, ZocDoc, and I'm like, whoa, this guy's got an appointment at 7 p.m. So I just book it. Turns out he's in San Jose. So he's up in the Bay Area. And I get this office calls me, and they're like, you're not close. I'm like, yeah, we're doing telehealth, so it doesn't matter. But he really educated me on a couple things that I had heard that weren't necessarily true. And then after I was given Regulin to take if I was having problems, I was imagining that was something I could take, on a regular basis. Where in reality, it's like, if you're getting sick, you should be using that. And so I was getting 10 milligram pills that I was taking twice or 3 times a day. And I'm like, and this guy's like, whoa, what? And I was like, yeah. So he gave me a prescription for 5 milligram pills to take sparingly if I ever feel like I'm going to get sick. And so it's just like hearing that. And he's like, I would really rather have you not take it at all. So I'd really, tell you that the best way to compensate for that disease is to have tight control with your blood sugar. And I'm like, oh, here we go again. Here's another person telling me, oh, is that what I should be doing? Yeah, I'm trying. But it makes sense. And it's something that, it's easier said than done, but the effort needs to be there for the success to happen.
Yeah. And I ran across the same thing. We talked about offline about gastroparesis and stuff like that, I've had the slow emptying and stuff like that. But at least I had a doctor who said, okay, I don't think, let's learn to deal with it this way, because the medication is actually not going to be the solution for you.
Right. It's a treatment, not a cure.
You're covering up the symptoms again. You're not solving the problem.
Right.
Well, it's kind of like taking insulin.
Well, ultimately, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Let's figure out what's causing the trouble. And I know that's the big research going on right now.
For sure. Well, we'll get there one day.
But like I said before, I think, thinking about it today, and I was in San Diego today because I'm in a clinical trial for something else, which we'll talk about at a later date. But just the new technologies that are out there is just amazing. And I said, being 50 years ago, would I want to deal with boiling, glass syringes and stuff like that? And
nah.
I mean, and I know I've only been dealing with this for between 15 to 20 years. But they keep, people keep saying, oh, I kept hearing 5 years from now, we're going to have a cure. 5 years from now, we're going to have a cure. I don't think that 5 years we're going to have a cure, but 5 years we're going to have normal. The technology is finally starting to gel, getting together. We've had all the different pieces, but it's starting to come together now. Like I said, even with the Control IQ, it's been such a great game changer for me. And that's just one company's solution. There are several of them out there.
Yeah.
Sure. And so it's, I think the technology is really helping us being able to function. I mean, first time I had to fill out my driver's license renewal after I got diagnosed, I was scared. Were they going to send it back and say, no, you can't have your automatic renewal?
Yeah.
Because years ago, you couldn't, especially if you're diagnosed type 1. You couldn't just get a driver's license like that. Years ago, I was interested in, took ground school to become a private pilot. Never did. Then when I got diagnosed, I said, well, I'll never be able to do that. Well, it could be a possibility now today. So things are changing a lot. So there is a great upside. And so I think that's probably one of the encouraging things I want to leave people with, is that if you're just never been exposed to this before and you've got a diagnosis or something like that, we've been through it where it's like, this seems like it's the end, but it's not. Yeah. We're really so positive. And I think that, there's so much going on nowadays. And I know that that's the whole purpose for us getting together, is just to be a resource for people. It's not we're giving you the answers. We're just telling you what's working for us, and here's alternatives.
We're just welcoming you into our circle at the end of the day.
Welcome.
Welcome.
It's our exclusive club, and you get to join us.
Yeah, and if you've made it this far, thanks for listening. But I think we'll close out. So we definitely want to talk again, and we'll be able to do so. We're happy to do so in person. It's nice to be able to spend time with somebody that we met through this type of program that we've put together, something that we'll continue to do. We have calls every Sunday. They happen at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard, 6 p.m. in the East Coast, and 11 p.m. in the UK. And that's something that you can join. It is free. It is not recorded. It is a safe space. It is for men, women, anybody that is living with diabetes, any human with diabetes.
All humans.
All humans with diabetes, and however you identify. Please join us. We'd be happy to have you. We talk about a bunch of different topics, and we were excited because Steve joins us every week. Even though he's up in Orange County, which is a stone's throw away from San Diego, we are excited to have him in the studio today, aka my living room. And we'll look forward to speaking again, and definitely on the topic of late diagnosis, and how we can address certain individual people who might be listening, to have them either reassess or kind of listen to themselves and figure out what they can do or need to do. So
definitely. Thank you, Steve. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you guys, and every week. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. All right. Well, back to our regular scheduled program.
Keep it 100.